Three adjectives to describe myself. I think people might describe me as excited about science, typically pretty organized, but occasionally a little bit frazzled. I wanted to come to Iowa State University because it's near to my family in Minnesota, and I thought there was a lot of opportunity for some of the work I wanted to get into when starting out my faculty position regarding lakes. Well, I think part of the reason that I got interested in lakes is because I grew up in Minnesota right near a lake, and maybe that interest was dormant for a lot of years when I was traveling around, but I saw how all of the things that I had studied in the course of my training, I could bring them together to study the lakes in Iowa that are facing some problems with a lot of excess nutrient loading, and that's causing algae to proliferate in the lakes. And so that's one of the main things we're studying in my research lab right now, is why blooms of algae are a problem here in Iowa, and maybe what we can do to mitigate them. So when we go out to the lake for our Iowa Water Center project, we use a motorboat because the lakes there are big enough that we really need to be able to zoom around to collect samples, and we use a special sampler that goes down into the water, and we can control which depth we're taking water from, and those samples come back up and get filled into tubes for different analyses. Sometimes the analyses might need a preservation with an acid, or they need to be preserved by freezing, and so we separate those right on the boat. We also take up the sediment core, so using that core barrel that you saw in the lab, and you saw a sediment core when we were in the lab, we take those up and bring them right back to the lab and analyze them on site at Lakeside Laboratory with our microelectrodes. And then the samples all come back here, and then we do a lot of the chemical analyses for measuring different nutrients like nitrate and phosphate. And our project has been looking at iron, and so we've been measuring iron in our lab or other labs on campus. And then that microscopy you saw, where we're actually looking at the samples to see what algae are in them to match up to the measurements that we made in the field. I think that it would be a disappointment if the students never had any fun while they were out. So when they're up at Lakeside Lab, there's also a lot of courses going on. They eat meals with all of the students who are up for summer courses. There's usually activities at night, hanging out on the dock and watching the sun set, or maybe having a bonfire. And there are some fun times on the boat, I think. Probably when things go wrong, sometimes it just ends up being funny, and we have to roll with those punches.
I like the red one.
Yeah, this one's pretty.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah.
What happened to the plank rings?
It died.
Oh, really? Oh.
But the good news is that those guys in ABE were able to extract DNA and use it as a positive control.
Okay.
So. If our research was like an athletic sport or a game, I think it would be like one of those TV shows where the contestants have to go out with only a backpack and navigate around and then make it in a certain time, because we have a lot of holding times for samples where we need to analyze them in a certain period of time, and we are also at the mercy of the elements when we're out in a boat. If there's lightning, we need to come in and stop sampling. So I would compare it to kind of an endurance wilderness event. So I think it's really important for students at a young age to learn about our research at Iowa State and the impacts it has, because it's their state. And what I found is that a lot of students, if you reach them while they're young, they remember it. Now in middle age here, I don't have the greatest memory, but I certainly remember some of the formative experiences I had when I was a kid. And so I think teaching kids about science and research at a young age will help them to appreciate the impacts it can have on things like water quality in the state of Iowa.